When I started this Asterix phase, the reason why I like the stories and characters so much became more and more clear as from things like the color palette, the characters' emotions, the way they can exhibit them. For example, the eyebrows, the work on them on both the human characters and even the animals. It feels so pure and purely there for fun, for entertainment, in just regular joy. And even though there definitely are some underlying tones described in the comics that even the authors admitted to, and in some cases regretted and fixed in the later issues. It's definitely not something that would be on the nose or something that would in any way distract me or make the experience lackluster. Maybe it's just my feeble pea-sized brain unable to properly discern these hinted issues, but I'm just reading a comic that isn't exactly trying to pretend to be something it's not. It is definitely a story aimed at children, teenagers, young adults with very, very vibrant characters, with even the backgrounds that have their own personality. They have emotions to express. They and it's just how should I put this? Innocent, and that's all I am currently looking for. So I'm more than willing to enjoy Asterix, even though I am way past the age of the target audience, and thus we are arriving at another volume, Asterix and the Normans, which receives, I think, two movie adaptations, one animated, one live action. I've never seen either one of them. I just remember the comic, and it's more than enough for me. It all starts with a letter the chieftain of the village Asterix lives in receives from his cousin from Lutetia, asking the Gauls to help make a proper man from the cousin's teenage son, and thus he sent him to the village because it is well known, as the last bastion of resistance against the Roman Empire. This rather difficult task is given to Asterix and Obelix, and thus their training to turn a teenage coward into a proper Gaul warrior begins. And that actually begins with a traditional Gaulish ball where the poor bard tries to sing yet isn't allowed to, can only play because of his ghoulish voice. And unfortunately for the trend chasing teenage boy, their ways of dancing and singing are too old school. So he decides to show them what they play in Lutetia with a clear poke at the Rolling Stones, thus turning the traditional dance into a rock and roll. And meanwhile, we see the Normans or Vikings suffering from a rather rare problem. which is they don't know fear. There is a great picture with a small child refusing to eat its cream soup, and his mother telling him that a troll will eat him if he doesn't finish it. But unfortunately, that doesn't work on him since he doesn't know any fear and just laughs at it. Another problem being the inability to get rid of hiccups because they can't get scared, and their chieftain decides to travel to Gaul to try and retrieve their sense of fear, because mainly because the chieftain heard that when fear gives you wings, as in the idiom, and they decide to sail towards Gaul. Back in the village, the training has begun for real now, and they are trying to make the not so much enthusiastic just for kicks participate. Fortunately, during their beach run, they spotted the Normans, whom the teenager knows from legends, and he gets extremely scared, panics, and runs back to the village, where he tries to rally the villagers because the Normans are coming, but it unfortunately works, but in a different way than he was expecting, as in they are very much eager to fight these bloodthirsty pirates, which he just completely doesn't understand, and thus he decides to go back to Lutetia. Unfortunately, uh, he gets ambushed by the Normans on his way back because they found out that he was very scared of them and they want him to teach them the secret to fear and thus the ability to fly thanks to fear. Unfortunately for them and for him, Just for Kicks is completely unable to do so, and then he is chained and pretty much just waiting for rescue. When Asterix and Obelix reach the temporary camp of the Vikings, a scuffle ensues, which even a Roman legion joins, and after a bit of fighting, Asterix and Obelix learn the purpose of this landing, and they promise the Normans to teach them the meaning of fear. The plan to do so is to introduce them to the horrible singing of the bard Cacophonics. Unfortunately, he ran away from the village because he felt he wasn't appreciated enough, and thus Obelix has to track his trail of destruction that he wreaks with his voice and try and retrieve him. Finally, he finds him and tries his absolute best to persuade him to come back because they need him to rescue the poor Just for Kicks. Fortunately, they arrive in time to prevent the Normans from throwing Just for Kicks off a cliff to force him to fly using his fear, and then they are subjected to the horrifying performance of Cacophonics when they start begging him to stop, and with Asterix's help they realize that what they feel from just the idea of having to listen to it again is in fact fear, and this wakes up their ability to both feel fear and even retreat from a battle with Asterix and Obelix, which was something they were unable and unwilling to do before they learned from the bard. And when he starts singing again, they attempt to flee by jumping from the cliff and waving their arms in an attempt to fly because they think that's what they can do when they are able to finally feel fear, which unfortunately turns out to be untrue, and thus begins their journey back home in, in doubts if they weren't conned by whoever told the poor chieftain that they will be able to fly if they know fear. A rather unfortunate victim appears in the form of our now well-known pirates who meet the Normans as they are traveling back home, and the Normans decide to fight their fears and overcome them, which results in sinking of the pirates' ship. And the ending is a rare one. There is the usual, not so rare banquet at the end of each volume, but this time, instead of the Bard Cacophonix who ends up tied up, hanging from a tree so that he cannot sing, this time he was the hero of this volume, so he gets to sing to his heart's content, while his biggest hater and enemy, the blacksmith, is now tied up, hanging from the tree with wheat stuffed in his ears so that he doesn't have to suffer too much. And that's the end of the adventure with Vikings trying to discover and ultimately overcome fear.